Thomas Sowell is a brilliant American thinker, academic. You'll see him in a second on the screen. Here he is being asked about anti-Semitism and the Jews. He's not Jewish himself, but watch what he says because it's so insightful.
That's the first chapter's black rednecks and white liberals. The second chapter is, are Jews generic? Why the jump from black rednecks and white liberals to are Jews generic? What's the point?
Well, this book is really about ethnic and cultural issues in general. So there's a chapter on the Jews, there's a chapter on the Germans, and then there's a chapter on history in general. So they're lumped together because they're all cultural, ethnic issues. Fascinating story, because among the middleman minorities, of which the Jews are the most prominent, the hostility to these people in countries around the world is out of all proportion to any other kind of group I can think of. In terms of violence, the number of Chinese killed, let's say, in 1 year, and by mob action, exceeds all the blacks lynched in the entire history of the United States. And the number of Armenians killed in Turkey, during the First World War, is greater than that. And of course, the number of Jews slaughtered on a number of occasions in history, even before the Holocaust, is greater than that. So that the question is, why this particular kind of people are the targets of so much venomous hatred? And I think the answer is that they not only succeed, they succeed in a way which is a threat to the egos of other people. But the guy who comes here, let's say from Vietnam or Korea, and arrives here with little more than the clothes on his back and a few words of broken English, and a decade later he has his own little business, and you see his son a few years after that getting ready to go off to Harvard or MIT. You got to ask yourself, you either got to, you've got to hate yourself for saying, my God, I've been stagnating, this guy was nothing and now he's risen up, or you're going to have to hate him. Years ago, one official of one of the Jewish organizations in New York asked me, what can Jews themselves do in order to minimize the hostility they face? And I gave him a one-word answer: fail. Because as long as you succeed, you're going to be hated.
That's funny. We can't even do failure well. That's the other problem. Let me tell you my thoughts on this, because there's definitely clearly an element of jealousy and resentment at Jewish resilience and Jewish success. I think that's partly what fuels Holocaust denial. It's like, how could it possibly be that after the worst genocide in human history, you managed to rebuild a state, you rebuild your people in such a short span of time? So I think that's definitely partly what's fueling it. The problem with his argument, though, where it doesn't give the full picture, is that there's been times in Jewish history where the Jews have been deeply hated, even though we're very poor and downtrodden. Look at the Pale of Settlement in Russia, where the Jews lived there and they were, living in the shtetls, and yet you had the pogroms and the massacres. So I think what he's getting at there is definitely a resentment towards something that the other nations and anti-Semites don't have. The question is, what is that? Success kind of touches on it, but it doesn't get to the root. There's also other minorities that are very successful. Yes, maybe they might not have quite the same level of persecution, but, Asian communities in America, are disproportionately successful in the Indian community. So I think where it gets to the heart of anti-Semitism is that the Talmud really tells us. The Talmud says that the hatred of the anti-Semites in history, and the word for hatred in Hebrew is sinah, comes from Sinai. They sort of do a play on words in the Talmud. They say that it comes from Sinai. What is Sinai? Mount Sinai is the place where the Jewish people were given their divine mission to be a light unto the nations, where they were given a divine mission which gave them a supernatural destiny in human history, where the laws of nature don't really govern them the way that they do other nations. I mean, for goodness sake, look at Jewish history. Look at our survival and look at Israel's survival since its re-establishment, despite facing incomparable persecution, exterminationist hatred, being very few in number, being, for most of our history, scattered throughout most of the world. I don't know any other nation that spent most of its history outside of its common land and language and culture. But despite all those things, we have managed to thrive in the conversation of human ideas, in our communities, and we have stuck to our values. And other empires and nations have risen and fallen, but you don't hear of modern day Romans that are any way recognizable to the ancient Romans, but the Jews of today are recognizable to the ancient Judeans. And so We're told that anti-Semitism comes from a resentment to that mission, that divine mission the Jewish people were given. Maybe it's jealousy because of that particular special role they have. Maybe it's indignation at the moral accountability that they tell all of humanity they have, which is what Hitler said was one of the reasons he hated the Jews, because he wanted the survival of the fittest mentality where the weak are destroyed. That's why he wanted to destroy the mentally and physically disabled and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the Jews said, no, you have moral duty to care for all human beings. That ultimately is where the resentment comes from at its roots. So I think Thomas Sowell is definitely touching on what's going on here. He definitely sees there's something completely abnormal about the Jewish story and about anti-Semitism. But I say it goes even deeper, and I think the rabbis of the Talmud really pinpointed it very, very well indeed. Before we finish, I just want to share with you something really important. We are told that Israel's actions are the cause of the Israeli-Arab conflict. But we've just released a groundbreaking documentary proving that Arab Islamic Jew hatred far predates Israel's re-establishment. This is a critical fact that everyone needs to learn about. Have a watch of our trailer for our new JTV Plus documentary entitled Arab Anti-Semitism Before Israel's Re-establishment. Picture yourself, it's 1834 and you're a Jew living in Tzfat, which is a northern city in Israel, then under the Ottoman Empire. Your family is part of this ancient city's spiritual heart for generations. You study Torah, you trade in the market, and live quietly among your Arab neighbours. But one day, a mob storms your street, shouting, "Kill the Jews!" Your home is looted, your synagogue burned, your loved ones beaten. This isn't about Israel. Israel won't exist for 114 years. This isn't about settlements, the IDF, or the 1948 displacements. This is raw, violent hatred aimed at you for being a Jew. And it's not just in Palestine, it's part of a centuries-old story of anti-Semitism woven into Arab and Islamic history, from the dawn of Islam to the streets of Hebron. The claim that this conflict began with Israel's creation, the Nakba, or modern policies, is a farce, a distortion that collapses under history's magnifying glass. Welcome to JTV Plus. I'm Ollie Annersfeld, and today we're uncovering a history too often buried, the relentless anti-Semitism among Arabs in Palestine before 1948, rooted in a broader Arab and Muslim hostility that began with Islam's inception in the 7th century. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.